Lindsey Baum, The Walk Home That Never Ended. On the evening of June 26, 2009, a 10-year-old girl left her friend's house in the small town of McCleary, Washington. Her walk home was short, only about a half a mile. The route was familiar. It passed through an ordinary residential neighborhood in the community where children regularly walked or rode their bicycles between their friends' homes. But Lindsey Baum never arrived. There was no confirmed cry for help, no reliable eyewitness report seeing her forced into a vehicle, no clothing, bicycle, or personal possession was found along the route, showing exactly where she might have disappeared. One moment, Lindsey was walking home. The next, she was gone. Her disappearance launched an enormous search involving local law enforcement officers, county investigators, state and federal agencies, search dogs, and hundreds of volunteers. For more than 8 years, her family hoped she might somehow still be alive. Then, in the fall of 2017, hunters made a discovery in a remote part of Kittitas County about 109 miles east of McCleary. The exact location has never been released since this is an ongoing open investigation. However, during the search for evidence that followed the discovery, a portion of Forest Service Road 3100 near Barber Creek and Buck Meadows was closed to the public. In the spring of 2018, DNA results proved the remains belonged to Lindsey. This discovery answered one painful question, but created many more. Who took Lindsey Baum? How did the person remove her from the small town without being seen? How and why did she end up across the Cascade Mountains? And after all these years, did someone still possess the information that could identify the killer? I'm Alan Key, a former major crimes detective and current polygraph examiner and author, and this is Cold Cases with Alan Key. Today we examine the disappearance and murder of Lindsey Baum. We will look at who Lindsey was, what happened on the night she vanished, the massive investigation that followed, and the questions that remain unanswered. Most importantly, we'll remember that Lindsey was not simply a missing person or a photograph or a face on a milk carton. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a young girl whose entire future was taken from her. Who was Lindsey? Lindsey Jo Baum was born on July 7, 1998. In June 2009, she was 10 years old and only days away from her 11th birthday. She lived in McCleary with her mother, Melissa, and older brother, Joshua. Lindsey had light brown hair and blue eyes. She was outgoing, creative, and known for expressing her opinions. Her mother said that Lindsey loved animals and wanted to become a veterinarian. She also was interested in writing and illustrating stories. Those details matter. In a cold case, it's easy for a victim to become reduced to a date, photograph, and a police number, but Lindsey had plans. She had interests that were beginning to shape the person she might one day become. Her family had moved to McCleary relatively recently. The community, located in eastern Grays Harbor County, had a population of fewer than 2,000 people. It is a former logging town surrounded by forests of western Washington. Olympia is about 20 miles to the east, while Aberdeen is 20 miles to the west, and the Pacific Coast is another 20 miles. It is the type of town where a child walking several blocks home did not automatically appear to be in danger. To understand this case, it helps to understand the setting. McCleary is not a large city filled with crowded streets and anonymous pedestrians. It is a compact community of homes, small businesses, parks, and neighborhood streets. U.S. Highway 8 passes along the town, carrying traffic between Olympia and Grays Harbor or the Pacific Ocean towns. That highway gives drivers quick access to Interstate 5 to the east and the coastal communities to the west. The town is also surrounded by forests and rural roads. From an investigative standpoint, that geography created two different realities. Inside McCleary, a stranger or unfamiliar vehicle might attract attention, but once someone left town, the surrounding highways and wooded areas offered numerous routes and isolated locations. The police department was small, about 6 men, including the chief of police. The chief of police and county sheriff, both friends of mine and people I respect, recognized early on that this case was going to require resources far beyond those available to a small municipal agency. That assistance came quickly, but the first question remained the most urgent. Where along the short, familiar walk did Lindsey disappear? June 26, 2009 was a Friday near the beginning of summer vacation. That evening, Lindsey and her brother visited the home of a friend. At some point, Lindsey and her brother argued. Her brother returned home without her. Lindsey remained at the friend's house a while longer. She reportedly asked whether she could spend the night, but that arrangement was not approved. At approximately 9:15 or 9:30 that evening, Lindsey left the friend's house and began walking toward her own home. She was wearing a light blue hoodie, pullover sweatshirt, and blue jeans. The walk should have only taken her about 10 minutes, and it was still light outside. In late June, days in Washington remained bright well into the late evening. Lindsey was reportedly seen by several people during portions of the evening, but the precise sequence of those observations has been debated. Some accounts place her near homes or businesses along the route. Investigators had to determine which sightings were reliable, which sightings were accurate, and whether anyone had seen her enter a vehicle or speak to another person. No confirmed witness publicly reported seeing an abduction. When Lindsey failed to arrive home, her mother began looking for her. Friends and neighbors were contacted. The route was checked. The friend's house was called. As the minutes passed, the possibility that Lindsey had simply stopped somewhere became less likely. Police were eventually notified. What began as a child who was late returning home rapidly turned into an emergency. For investigators, the circumstances were immediately alarming. Lindsey was 10 years old. She had left a known location and was expected at home. The distance was short, roughly a half mile, and she had disappeared without leaving an obvious trail. The first search. The search expanded quickly. Police officers, firefighters, deputies, and volunteers checked streets, yards, vacant buildings, drainage areas, and wooded locations around McCleary. Search dogs were used. Aircraft and specialized search teams later became involved. Residents checked garages, sheds, vehicles, and other places where a frightened or injured child might have become trapped. Authorities also searched waterways and surrounding forests. Lindsey's photograph was distributed throughout Washington and across the country. As mentioned, the Grace Harbor County Sheriff's Office became involved, along with the FBI and other agencies. Investigators interviewed people living along Lindsey's route. They examined registered sex offenders and individuals with histories involving children. They looked at people who had been in McCleary temporarily, including workers, visitors, and drivers passing through town. Vehicles seen in the area were evaluated. Tips came in from across the country. Some were well-intentioned but mistaken. Others were rumors, psychic claims, or information that could not be verified. Every major missing child case generates an enormous volume of information. The challenge is not simply obtaining tips. The challenge is identifying the one tip that connects to something real. Investigators must ask, could the person providing the information actually know what they claim to know? Does the time fit the known timeline? Can the reported vehicle be confirmed? Did the witness describe Lindsey before seeing her photograph in the news? Can telephone records, receipts, photographs, and other witnesses support the account? A tip may sound dramatic and still lead nowhere. A quiet observation that initially appears unimportant may eventually solve the case. During those first days, authorities continued to hold out hope that Lindsey might be found alive. But as the search continued without finding clothing, personal belongings, or evidence of an accident, investigators increasingly considered the likelihood that she had been abducted. So how could she have disappeared? One of the most difficult questions is how someone could take a child from a small town without creating a scene that others would clearly remember. Abductions do not always look the way they are portrayed in movies. There may be no screaming, prolonged struggles, or obvious attack. A child may recognize the person. The offender may use deception. The person might claim that the parent has been injured and that the child is needed somewhere. An offender may offer a ride, ask for help finding an animal, or use authority to obtain compliance. A vehicle can stop, a conversation can occur, and the vehicle can leave within seconds. Investigators, therefore, had to consider both strangers and people familiar to Lindsey. Did she encounter someone she knew? Did someone follow her from her friend's house? Was her route observed in advance? Was she taken by a person passing through McCleary? Or did someone see an unexpected opportunity and act without prior planning? The fact that Lindsey's remains were eventually found far from McCleary suggests that the offender had access to transportation. It also suggests the person was willing and able to travel from western Washington into the interior of the state. But that does not tell investigators whether the trip was made immediately or sometime later. It does not establish whether the offender lived near McCleary, near the recovery site, or somewhere between them. And it does not prove the offender was familiar with the location where Lindsey was left. These are possible investigative directions, not conclusions. Years without an answer. As weeks became months and months became years, Lindsey's families continued searching for answers. Her image appeared in missing child posters, television programs, and public awareness campaigns. Investigators followed thousands of leads. Properties and vehicles were searched. Individuals were interviewed and, in some cases, interviewed again. Authorities examined possible connections to other crimes. No publicly identified suspect was charged with taking Lindsey. The case remained active, but the passage of time created new obstacles. Memories became less precise. People moved away. Vehicles were sold or destroyed. Buildings changed. Potential evidence was lost through ordinary life and the passage of time. Yet, time can also create opportunities. Relationships change. Loyalties end. A person who once protected someone may decide to speak. Children who heard something in 2009 become adults who better understand what they witnessed. Technology improves. Old evidence can be examined in ways it was not possible when it was first collected. For more than 8 years, the central question remained whether Lindsey was alive. Then in the fall of 2017, hunters entered a remote area of Kittitas County. The discovery in Kittitas County. In September 2017, hunters discovered human remains in a remote area of eastern Washington. The location was in Kittitas County in the Manassas region, about 20 miles west of Ellensburg. The terrain is rugged and heavily forested, with mountain roads, steep slopes, and large areas rarely visited except by hunters, hikers, and outdoor enthusiasts. The exact recovery location has not been publicly released. The remains were submitted for forensic examination. DNA testing eventually confirmed that they belonged to Lindsey Baum. Authorities publicly announced the identification in May 2018. For Lindsey's family, the announcement ended the hope that she might someday walk through the door, but it also confirmed what investigators had long feared. Lindsey had not simply wandered away. She had been abducted and murdered. Following the identification, more than 200 law enforcement personnel, search and rescue volunteers, canine teams, and forensic specialists searched the surrounding area. They covered roughly 2 square miles looking for additional remains, clothing, objects, vehicle evidence, or anything else that could connect a person to the site. Officials described the region in which Lindsey was found as steep mountains, heavily timbered, deep ravines, and rocky cliffs. And officials have withheld many details about the recovery, such as the precise location where Lindsey was found, the condition of her remains, whether clothing or other personal belongings were recovered, the cause and manner of her death, and how long her remains had been at that location. Remember, this is still an ongoing investigation, and all details could still be relevant to the investigation. Withholding these details is common in an active homicide investigation. Information known only to investigators and the killer can be used to evaluate later confessions and tips. A person who provides accurate, unreleased details may possess direct knowledge. A person whose account contradicts the evidence can be eliminated or challenged. Investigative secrecy can be frustrating to the public, but it may protect the very information needed to solve the case. The investigative questions. The discovery site created a new set of questions. Why Kittitas County? The Manassas area is separated from McCleary by more than 109 miles and a drive through or around the Cascade Mountains. Was the offender familiar with the area? Did the person hunt, camp, hike, or work there? Did the offender have family or property nearby? Was the site deliberately selected because it was remote? Or was it simply a place the offender encountered while traveling? Investigators would examine people connected to both locations. They would look for individuals who lived in one area and worked in the other. They would consider hunters, truck drivers, construction workers, forestry employees, and others whose routines might take them across the state. They would review vehicles, travel patterns, telephone information, and known associates. The recovery location may also reveal something about the offender's behavior. A person unfamiliar with mountain roads may be reluctant to travel deeply into isolated terrain, particularly while transporting a victim or remains. But familiarity can come from many sources. Someone may have visited only once. A person may have followed a map or simply turned onto a forest road seeking privacy. The location is evidence. By itself, it does not identify the killer. In 2023, investigators conducted another large search of the wooded area of Mason County, which is adjacent to McCleary. After receiving information they considered potentially relevant to Lindsey's case, more than 160 professionals and volunteers participated. The search demonstrated that authorities were still pursuing leads years after Lindsey's remains were identified. However, no arrest connected to Lindsey's murder was publicly announced. The case remains open. A detective's perspective. From an investigative standpoint, several aspects of the case stand out. First is the extraordinarily narrow disappearance window. Lindsey left a friend's home and should have arrived at her own home within minutes. That allows investigators to focus intensely on a limited route and period. But it also means the offender may have needed only a few seconds. Second, the absence of the obvious primary scene. Investigators do not know publicly where Lindsey was killed. It may have happened inside a vehicle, a residence, an outbuilding, or another location entirely. Without that scene, investigators may lack blood evidence, footprints, fibers, or other material that could identify her offender. Third, the distance between McCleary and Kittitas County. That travel created risk for the offender. Every mile offered the possibility of a traffic stop, a vehicle breakdown, a witness, or surveillance recording. Investigators would want to reconstruct who traveled between regions during that relevant period. The problem is that in 2009, surveillance cameras were far less common than they are today. License plate readers were not routinely recording vehicles across most rural highways. Many businesses reused and erased surveillance video after only a short time. If investigators did not identify a particular vehicle quickly, the opportunity to retrieve that evidence may have disappeared. Fourth is victim-offender familiarity. A 10-year-old might enter a vehicle voluntarily if she knew the driver, but she could also be deceived or physically overpowered by a stranger. Investigators cannot assume familiarity solely because no struggle was witnessed. Finally, cold cases require patience. The offender may have told someone. A former spouse may remember an unexplained absence. A relative may recall a vehicle being cleaned, repaired, sold, or hidden. Someone may remember unusual travel to Kittitas County or in that direction. A person may possess a photograph, journal, digital file, or object whose importance was not recognized at the time. The answer may not come from one dramatic discovery. It may come from several small facts that finally fit together. When I was attending Washington State's Criminal Justice Training Commission's basic and advanced homicide classes taught by Washington's King County Sheriff's investigator Robert Keppel, he continually said the answer's in the box. This means the suspect or clues needed to solve this case may have already been looked at, but the pieces have not yet fit together. So now let's look at why this case still matters. Lindsey would be an adult today. She might have become the veterinarian she imagined becoming. She might have written and illustrated books. She might have built a career, traveled, married, and raised children of her own. Those possibilities were taken from her. Her mother and brother were left with years of uncertainty following the devastating confirmation that Lindsey had died. The McCleary community also changed. Parents who once felt comfortable allowing children to walk between neighborhood homes became more cautious. An ordinary route became associated with one of Washington's most haunting crimes. Public interest in the case can help generate information, but it must be handled responsibly. Unverified accusations can harm innocent people and distract investigators. Internet rumors can be repeated so often that they begin to sound like established facts. The responsible approach is to separate three categories: what is known, what investigators reasonably believe, and what remains only theory. What is known is that Lindsey left her friend's home on June 26, 2009. She never arrived home. Her remains were discovered in Kittitas County in 2017 and identified the following year. Her death is being investigated as a kidnapping and murder, and no one has been publicly charged with killing her. So in closing, someone knows what happened to Lindsey Baum. The person responsible may have acted alone, but crimes of this magnitude rarely remain completely isolated from the offender's life. Someone may have noticed a change in behavior. Someone may remember an unexpected trip. Someone may have heard a statement that seemed strange at the time. Someone may have been asked to provide an alibi. Someone may have protected a friend, spouse, or relative and now regrets that decision. After so many years, even information that appears insignificant should be given directly to investigators. Do not confront a suspected person. Do not publish accusations online. Do not attempt to conduct an amateur investigation or interrogation. Provide the information to law enforcement and allow investigators to compare it against evidence that has never been made public. Kittitas County authorities confirm that the Grays Harbor County Sheriff's Office and the FBI continue to be the leads in this investigation, even following the identification of Lindsey's remains. Lindsey Jo Baum was 10 years old when she disappeared. She was a daughter, sister, a friend, an animal lover, and a young storyteller. She deserves to be remembered for all those things. And she deserves justice. I'm Alan Key, and this has been Cold Cases with Alan Key. For more respectful, fact-based examinations of unsolved crimes, subscribe to this channel and share this episode. You can also find my book, Cold Cases, the most infamous unsolved murders and the science that could solve them today, available through Amazon. Until next time, remember, behind every cold case is a victim. Behind every unanswered question is a family still waiting for answers. And no matter how many years has passed, the truth still matters. One last comment, because I know most listeners will be asking, where was Lindsey's father? Lindsey's father, Scott Baum, was in Tennessee at the time of her disappearance. He was serving in the Tennessee National Guard and getting ready to be deployed to Iraq. Authorities included him in their investigation, but have since ruled him out as a possible suspect.